information, from multiple sources. So instead of going to one particular source, now we can look at, this one site and be able to get, kind of like the pulse of the industry as a whole. Um, so I recommend, just kind of checking on this, maybe every other day or every week or something like that, just to know what is happening. Um, I am recording already. So what I'm doing today is I will do something that should make things a little bit easier for you guys to find the right time. Oh, okay. Fine. X clock dash D dash update one. Yep, there we go. All right, so I'm putting a tiny little clock, right here at the upper right corner. It shows you the time and it is also being recorded. So that means, if you are to write down or jot down, like the time when I start to talk about a topic that you think like, oh, okay, this is something that's important. I might need to review or just to watch the video again. You can write down the time, and because the time is actually in the recording itself, it makes it easier for you guys to home into exactly the right time. Okay, so you don't have to do all the subtraction, like, oh, okay, the recording starts at 9 o'clock and the the topic was at 10:05, so I need to look into 65 minutes into the recording. So you don't have to do the math. You just look at the time on your notes, look at the time in the recording, and just kind of slide your video forward and backward until you get to that time, right? So that hopefully will make it easier to find the content that you need to find. Has anyone used the recording yet for this class? Yep. Yeah, the YouTube channel is linked from the module now. So there's one link here, which is to my YouTube channel with all the lecture recording, and everything is dated and coded, as to which class the recording is for. Now, if you guys want to watch the recording for 310 or 440, your CISP 310 and CISP 440, you're more than welcome to. Okay, there's no restriction as to what video you're supposed to watch and which ones you're not supposed to watch. You can go back in time. Okay, it goes all the way back at least 12 years, I think. So I record every lecture. Well, okay, sometimes I forget, but almost every lecture, over the past 12 years. You can kind of imagine the number of video recordings and also the total number of minutes. But since YouTube is not complaining, I will keep doing it without erasing anything. All right. So we got a few things happening today. I'm kind of playing catch up a little bit here, so I do apologize that I cannot get you guys new content and new material as quickly as I would like to. So when you go to the announcement, I just this is just for today this morning. Okay, so if you have not received it or you haven't read it, it is not your fault. It is mine. Okay, because I could not get the content ready early enough. But basically, another module is now available on conditional statements and conditions. So you can start reading it. I'm still working on it, but the portion that you can see is fine. Okay, so that's we may or may not be able to get to conditional statements today, so we'll see. Okay, all right. So with all that said, now we go back to the usual stuff that we talked about. Okay, the stuff that we have already talked about. Has anyone checked out the other links too, like the personality assessment? Okay, very good. So how was it? I'm just curious. I don't need to know yours, but what do you think of the assessment? You've done it before? Okay, but it was kind of accurate. Okay, I'll tell you a story. Okay, this is a kind of like a personal story. My wife, was was the first one who did it, because of working for the state, and she got a free test to do this. And so, she was, urging me to do the same thing. I would go like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it later. I'll do it later." And then many years later, I did it. And and then I showed her, "Okay, this is the result that I got." And then she looked at the result and go like, "Well, it is as if somebody has known you for decades," because the description was spot on. And it was able to explain to my wife some of the behavior of mine that she could not explain, she could not comprehend for years. And then she looked at my personality type, assessment, and also the traits and the preferences, of that particular type. She goes like, "You are actually a textbook of this type, you know, like I'm just standard within that type, but very non-standard for the rest of the population." So if you have not done it, I think it is kind of fun. Okay, don't take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes it may not be 100% accurate. So certain things that it says about your type may not be directly applicable to you. For example, okay, I'm an INTP. Okay, so you guys can look it up. It's like, okay, what kind of a person is tech? It is INTP. And it is commonly understood that INTPs are perpetually late for everything. They have no concept of time. Well, I can tell you that that is not me. Okay, I am always punctual. I start the class right on the minute. Okay, not quite on the second, but definitely on the minute. Unless something happens to me, okay, like a car accident or I'm sick or something else, I'm always on time. Okay, if you don't see me within 10 minutes after 9 o'clock, something has happened. Okay, you can make that conclusion about me. So there are certain things about the assessment may not be entirely true about you, but in general, okay, it is typically fairly accurate. But it also requires you to answer the questions, kind of authentically. In other words, the first thing that comes to your mind, that's the answer. Okay, don't think about it. It's like, okay, how do I want myself to be perceived? Nope, it's just what you're thinking right now. Okay, just answer those questions. These two are going to be useful as well, especially this one, because these are things that you can do to kind of give yourself an assessment of your interests, and and it can help you direct where you should go in the future. Okay, so that's kind of important. Um, there is also something that I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is deep seek. Okay, so if you look it up, you can find it's kind of like your ChatGPT, except this one is from China. Okay, and there are many articles right now, to talk about it. Okay, so if you look at all the news pieces lately, like today and yesterday, there's a lot. Basically, the general thing that industry is saying is they are interested in knowing how China, okay, an open source model from China was able to surpass the top model in the United States basically in no time. Okay, and the most interesting part is Microsoft was the one is the one that is launching a probe into whether DeepSeek, got information about ChatGPT inappropriately. Yep. So I just find it kind of interesting. And for people like myself, INTPs like to ask questions, like to know why something happens. So my big question is, why is DeepSeek released as open source? What is the motivation? What are the rationale? And so on and so forth. Okay. So I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm not going to tell you what I think of it, but those are the things that I think about. Okay. That's intrinsic to my personality type. So all 16 personality types have certain intrinsic traits. Knowing yours is important. And why do you think that is the case? Why do you think it is important to kind of have a general idea of what your personality traits are, what you're intrinsically um, interested to do, and what you do not like to do, and so on, in the context of a class? Why do you, it makes it easier? Okay, that is good, but it also changes what is the best way for you to study. Okay, if you are an extrovert, okay, you probably do not want to study by yourself. Okay, most extroverted people like to study with other people. Now, I can tell you right away, okay, throughout college and graduate school, I hated the idea of having to study with somebody else. Exactly. When the other person is saying something, like asking questions and whatnot, I cannot hear my own voice. And I need that when I'm studying. Okay, I'm having a conversation with myself when I'm studying, and I'm just kind of, asking myself, posing some questions and trying to answer those questions. When there's somebody else, especially when there are several people around me and they're chatting with each other, even if it's on topic, I could not listen to my own thoughts, and that's a big problem for me. So I always study alone. Okay, now if somebody has a question, I can allocate, say, an hour or half an hour to try to help that person to answer some of those questions. That was helpful because when you're trying to explain something to somebody else, you are basically traversing different neural pathways in your mind. You're making new paths and you're retraveling some paths that you probably want to reinforce in the first place. So, answering questions is actually a very good form of studying. But I cannot do that while I am trying to understand the material myself. But some other people like to think out loud. Okay, they have a question and they just verbalize it. And when I hear those questions, I cannot concentrate on my own thoughts. Okay, so that's part of the reason why personality types can be very helpful. When you are studying, because it can help you determine what is the best strategy for you to study. But that's just my take on it. Okay, you certainly can disagree with it. Anyway, so now we actually go back to the stuff that that we are talking about, which is assignment statements and sequences. So let me open a new tab. And I think we are in here. Okay, I did not actually check my notes today. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and start with this. Okay, so we go back and talk about the syntax of an assignment operation. So an assignment operation. Okay, how do we call this format? What is this? Starts with a B. BNF. Very good. Okay, so BNF is a syntax to describe syntax. Okay, it helps you understand the structure of something. What is on the left-hand side, assignment in this case, is a token to be expanded, or it can be expanded to what is on the right-hand side of the colon colon equal symbol. Okay, so this symbol here, the colon colon equal symbol, is also known as can expand to. Okay, basically it separates the left-hand side, the token to be expanded to at least one of the alternatives, what it can expand to. Okay. So this part here is the actual assignment structure. It has a left-hand side, a equal symbol, which is a terminal, and a right-hand side. The left-hand side is a token by itself. The right-hand side is also a token by itself. And then the equal symbol is in boldface, which means it is a terminal. Okay, it does not expand. That's exactly the character that you need to use when you try to specify an assignment operation. Okay, so I think this part is probably a little bit of a repetition from Monday. All right, and I believe that this part we talked about already. The left-hand side expands to or can expand to a variable because later on we'll find out that there are also a few other things that the left-hand side can expand to. But right now we just say that well it can expand to the name of a variable. The right-hand side expands to just what I call an expression. An expression is just like in mathematics, an expression is a plus b, the whole thing divided by 2, and so on. So right now, I'm not going to go into the exact details of the BNF of expressions because that turns out to be a big mess. Okay, it's a hot mess in the sense that it is complicated. Okay, it is well defined, but it is complicated, and I don't want to introduce that type of complexity at this point of the class. Then what about variable name? So we're going to look into how a variable name is structured. A variable name can expand to an identifier because an identifier can be used not only to differentiate a variable from another variable. It can also be used to differentiate a function from another function, which we'll talk about later in this class. So we'll just say that a variable name can expand to an identifier. So now the question is, what is an identifier? An identifier is down here. It it has two is a sequence of two tokens. The first token is simply known as ID first char, or the first character of an identifier. The second portion is optional because you can see the subscript OPT here. It means this whole thing is optional. It is the rest portion of an identifier. Okay, so the first part is not, this part is not optional, but the second part is optional. Is that okay? So now we look at what is first ID first char. ID first char is first introduced here. It is a L case or uppercase or the underscore symbol itself. Now it's really hard to see that this underscore is actually boldface, but since it's just a line, it is difficult for us to see that it is actually it's actually boldface, but it is. Okay, so it's a terminal already. So does that mean I can name a variable as a single underscore? Yes, you can. Would you do that? Well, probably not in a real situation, okay? Just for fun, you can name a variable as underscore, another variable as underscore underscore, yet another variable as underscore underscore underscore. That program will be very difficult to read. But can you do it? The answer is yeah, you can do it if you want to punish yourself and also everybody else who has to read your program. Okay? All right. So what about L case? L case is here. So L case can expand to basically all the lowercase characters. You can definitely see that A, B, and then all the way to Z are bold-faced. So that means lowercase L case as a token simply means any one of the lowercase letters in English. That's all that's all it is. Okay. What about U case? U case is uppercase. Once again, it expands to a bunch of tokens. I mean, excuse me, it expands to a bunch of terminals, and these are all alternatives, which means a single U case token expands to one uppercase letter. Are we doing okay so far with that? Yes, go ahead. Yeah, those are all terminals because they are bold-faced. Okay. So the only one that is difficult to see is the underscore because bold-faced underscore just looks just like underscore itself. All right. So now we go like, okay, so that means the first character of an identifier can be what? Actually, I think I forgot one. I did. Oh, no, I did not forget. So it's either it can be a lowercase letter, can be uppercase letter, can also be underscore itself. Those are all the alternatives that you have for the first character or the first letter of an identifier. Are we doing okay so far with that? Hmm? Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. Hmm. First character of an identifier. Right. In the simplest case, yes. So that means you can um, a an identifier can be as simple as one single letter, uppercase or lowercase, or just the underscore symbol. It can be as simple as that. But you can also make it a lot longer if you want to, because it has a second portion. The second portion is ID rest portion, which is basically saying the rest of an identifier, anything other than the first character, can be this thing here. But it is optional, which means you need at least one character, but you can have a longer identifier if you want to. So the rest portion expands to two alternatives. This is the first alternative, which is a single ID rest char, which is a character for the rest of the identifier. other than the first one. Yes. So all the terminals must be verbatim. So which one are you having a question about? No, a terminal is something that you type into the program verbatim. Yep. Sure. As opposed to token, which is just a placeholder for something else. So with a token, you always have to look up, what can that token possibly expand to? But with a terminal, it means it really is literally just uppercase A over here, lowercase z over here, literally just six over here. So a terminal represents something that you just type on the keyboard. It has to be verbatim as described. All right. Okay. So now, this is a fairly typical thing that we do now because you can see how ID rest portion expands to ID rest portion followed by a single ID rest char. So that means in other words, it can be any number of ID rest char, at least one, but any number thereafter. So you can have those. So the rest, when you look at ID rest char, it is it expands to ID first char. So anything that you can use as the first character of an identifier, you can also use it for the rest of the identifier. Okay, which also means you can have lowercase a to z, uppercase a to z, and the underscore symbol for the rest, the non-first character of an identifier. But we also have an alternative. So the vertical bar is neither a terminal nor a token. It is part of the actual syntax description. It means alternative. So a rest char, ID rest char has an alternative. It can also expand to a digit. So what is a digit? It is a token, and digit is explained up here. It is basically the actual base 10 digits from 0 to 9. So what this means, okay, in very simple terms, is the first character of an identifier has to be underscore, lowercase a to z, or uppercase a to z. It cannot be a digit. You cannot start the name of a variable with 0 to 9. The rest of the name of a variable or any identifier can be underscore, lowercase a to z, uppercase a to z, as well as 0 to 9. So 0 to 9 is not an option for the first character, but they are options for the rest of the identifier. Are we good so far with this particular rule specification? Yep. So those are the names of the tokens, and we start. Hmm? They're just names of tokens. So this is the name of a token that is referenced here as well as here. This is a token that is referenced here. I can make another example. This is a token that is referenced here. Okay. All right. Yes. Okay. So let me see if I can overlay, or not so much overlay, but to display the tablet next to the material. Oh, not this one. I'm trying to resize the window before I drag it onto the projector. So give me a little bit of time to do that. Okay. Because I want you to be able to see both the tablet as well as the BNF rules, like so. Okay. So now I can give you some examples. Okay, some that are actual, legal, or legitimate, identifiers, and others are not. Okay. So I'm gonna start with this. Is that legitimate as an identifier? It's not a minus, it's an underscore. Yep. What about uppercase T A K? Is that an identifier? What about T A K 1? What about T A K underscore my last name? Okay, very good. What about one cool prof? Aha. Okay, very good. Good prof is not a identifier because the first character is a digit one, and the digit of one is not an option for ID first char. An ID first char has to be the first character of an identifier. And since the digit one is not one of the options, so that's why one cool prof with a digit one is not an identifier. The compiler will complain about it and say, okay, it will give you some error message that is probably not in the form of, oh, this is not a good identifier. Okay, that's something that you will learn in CISP 360 is when you have a syntax error, the error message that you get from the compiler is very typically something that is a little bit cryptic. There's a reason because the compiler looks at everything not from a human perspective, but from a compiler perspective. The compiler has a very mechanical way of looking at the syntax and BNF. So it would basically say, oh, it doesn't match what I am expecting. Okay. But what it is expecting is something that you may not even think of. And that's why the error message may not make sense to you. So here's a little tip. If you want to write it down, you can do so. If you think I'm just going to wait until CISP 360 to learn it, that's up to you as well. If you get to CISP 360, my advice is think of all the possible ways for things to go wrong and do it. Okay? Knowingly make mistakes in your program. Compile the program so that you can actually see what error message is the result of the compiling of what kind of things that can go wrong. So the next time you see the error message from actually a program that you want to write, you can now interpret the message and go like, oh, okay, this message, even though it says blah blah blah, it probably means blah 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 blah. Okay, so, pre-make the mistake so that you can have a map of what kind of mistake leads to what kind of error message. All right. So that's just a tip. Okay. Definitely we are not going to have homework assignments in this class to do just that. It is just something that I think might be helpful to some of you when you move on to CISP 360. All right. Yep. Go ahead. Hmm. Yep. This is how. So verbally, using BNF, that is correct. So verbally, I could have just explained it as, oh, the name of a variable can start with underscore, uppercase, or lowercase letters, followed by, optionally, underscore, uppercase, lowercase, and digits. I could have just said that, okay? So exactly. So why did I spend the time to give you the BNF and then spend the time to explain the BNF? Why do you think I did that? That is one. That is one reason. The second one, yes, go ahead. Hmm. What is the difference between the ID first char and ID rest char are different because ID first char says it can be lowercase, uppercase, or just the underscore. But ID rest char can be anything that can make up an ID first char and also any digit. So that's the difference. But getting back to the rationale of why I use BNF to explain something that I could have explained in 2 or 3 sentences is because I want you to, one, know what is BNF, and two, to have a chance to practice understanding BNF. Okay. Okay. So let's go. Let's dig that hole a little bit deeper. Okay. Because remember, my way of studying is is chasing down the rabbit hole until I get to a place that I cannot dig anymore. Okay. So let's dig it a little bit more. So why do you think I want you to know and be able to practice BNF as the first class in programming? Yes. To understand the language to describe any programming language, right? So do you think it's going to be useful down the line if computer science or software development is going to be your thing? Yes, okay? It is going to be pretty much universally useful if you want to pursue down this road. If you want to write programs in any programming language, I don't care whether it's Ruby, Python, JavaScript, or any other language that will pop up by the time you graduate, chances are it will be described in BNF. So understanding BNF, early on, or at least knowing what it is approximately, is going to be helpful down the line. So this is the kind of way that I think, I like to front load everything. Do you guys know what this means, front loading? Okay. Hmm? It means moving the difficult stuff, earlier instead of pushing it later. Yeah, so there are two ways to look at a learning curve. Okay, so let's say you are starting here and you need to end up here. Okay, so do you prefer a learning curve that is like this, or do you prefer a learning curve that's more like this? The first or the second? Well, that is correct. Okay. If you do the hard stuff first, it's easier for you to pick up even harder stuff later on. And you will need that edge in order to get employed in the high tech industry now. Yes. Okay, sure. Everything is still being recorded. Yep. hmm So that's why, I prefer to front load, some of the difficult stuff to earlier. Now, do you absolutely need to know the mechanism of BNF? Am I going to quiz you on this? Probably not. Okay. But do I want you to have exposure and understand the importance and what it is for? The answer is definitely a yes. Okay. Because okay, I know what I'm about to say is discouraging in certain ways, but that's not the intention. Okay. The intention is to give you some context. At a 4-year university, typically, they do not have anything equivalent to CISP 300 nor CISP 360. Then you ask, so what do they start with? What is equivalent to our CISP 400? CISP 400 is the very first programming class at many 4-year universities. Okay, so what do you think of that? Yes, the expectation is different. Okay, at a 4-year university, they will just give you a link to the description of BNF and go like, I'll leave it to you guys to read and understand it. And then the class just moves on to talk about object-oriented programming. That is what 4-year universities typically do. I think some are starting to have equivalences of CISP 360, but very, very few, if anything at all, will start with CISP 300. This class simply does not exist in most 4-year universities. Okay, so that's another reason why I front load some of the more difficult concepts because that gives you an idea of you can self-assess of how am I doing in this class understanding the front loaded the slightly more difficult concept but it's front loaded to the beginning, which also ties in with the personality test and many other ways for you to self-assess. Okay, is this a good career option for me? Okay, and I can tell you there are many career options that are bad for me. Professional basketball, MMA, okay? Yes, I cannot take a punch, okay? Even a small one, I cannot take it. So there are many occupations that are poor choices for me. As much as I want to look cool as an MMA fighter, I don't think I want to do that. Okay? Well, plus I don't look cool to begin with. There's no way to make me look cool in any way, so might as well just not pursue that option. Okay? But when it comes to thinking and problem solving, I may not be the quickest person to do it, but guess what? I enjoy doing it. I may not be quick, but I like doing it, so I can spend a lot of time figuring out programming stuff, technological stuff, without noticing the passage of time. Go like, okay, maybe I want to get into that field, and that's why I'm here. Okay, so I said all of this not to discourage people from pursuing, a career related to computer science, but to make sure that people understand what it entails. Okay, because this is your very first class. Okay, many people who may not, there are many other options. So I encourage people to stay, open-minded to other options, as you take different classes, just explore different options. That's all I'm trying to say. All right. So are we getting back to this? Are we good? Okay so far? Okay, excellent. So now we introduce the concept of a statement. So an assignment statement is an assignment followed by a terminal of a semicolon. In other words, assignment itself, okay, left-hand side, the equal symbol, and the right-hand side is not a statement. It is actually what we call an expression. Now that will get awfully confusing when you get to the next class. But for this class, I'm just going to say it is just an expression. To turn an expression into a statement, all you need is to end the expression with a semicolon. And the semicolon is a terminal. So that means every statement that has an assignment um, ends with a semicolon. So this will become important later on. Are we doing okay so far? Assignment itself is an expression, but assignment statement is an assignment expression followed by a semicolon. Yes, go ahead. Okay, excellent. Okay, very good. And asking questions is great. Okay, it is great for you because as you try to understand the concept, the formulation of a question by itself is already beneficial. Okay, I don't know about you, but I have taught this class and other classes many, many times. There are many occasions where I see a person raising their hand, but I'm still talking. So when I'm done talking and I address that person, it's like, okay, now go ahead and ask your question. There are more than a few occasions where that person would go like, "Oh, never mind, I figured it out already." Because in the process of asking the question or formulating the question, you are going through all the pathways in your mind of all the concepts that you have recently learned, and many times by formulating the question itself, you already get to the solution. So that's why asking questions is so important. Okay, are we good so far? Yes. So the semicolon is just the syntax to turn an assignment expression into an assignment statement. Yep. I think I might have some examples here down there. So this is, so let me highlight the portion that is an assignment expression. This is an assignment expression, but the entire line is an assignment statement. The reason why the concept of a statement is important is because later on when we talk about conditional statements and loops and whatnot, they operate by statements, not expressions. So that's why it is important for us to understand that assignment, even though it is just an expression, we can turn it into a statement easily just by using a semicolon. Is that okay? So this is not in the notes, but if you want to write it down, you can do so. The semicolon that ends an expression and turn it into a statement is also called a terminator because it terminates an expression and then turn it into a statement. Alrighty. Yes, go ahead. Huh? One more time. As the semicolon to end an expression in order to turn it into a statement is also called an expression terminator. Think of Arnold. So imagine Arnold as the Terminator, and he's wearing a suit that looks like a semicolon. I think that mental picture would stick with you for a long time. And no, I did not script this part of the lecture. It just popped up in my head. That's one thing about INTPs, or any type of N something P, is ideas just kind of bubbles up from nowhere, and then and as quickly as they pop up, it also disappears. I cannot remember what I said like 2 sentences ago. I really cannot. All right. So in this case, okay, let's look at the statement that we are looking at here. So we know the syntax already. Okay, so let's identify the syntax. From the equal symbol here, we know it is an assignment expression, or at least this part here is an assignment expression. The whole thing is an assignment statement. And the left-hand side is a var name, is a variable name. And in the variable name, this is, okay, it's harder for me to highlight just one character, but there you go. This is ID first char, but is it okay as an ID first char? Let's see. ID first char can be underscore, a lowercase letter can be an uppercase letter. That's a lowercase letter. It's legit. Okay. What about the rest of it? They're all fine, because they're basically referring to ID rest portion, and ID rest portion is basically any number of lowercase, uppercase letters, the underscore, or a digit. Okay, so all of these are just letters, uppercase or uppercase, lowercase or uppercase, so they're all good. This is our right-hand side, which is quote unquote an expression. Zero is an expression. It's a very simple expression. Nonetheless, it is an expression. It gives you a value. Okay, so everything is legit. All the parts are fine. This is a syntactically correct assignment statement when we include the semicolon. So the next question is, but what does it do? Okay, yeah, what does an assignment do? Well, that part is actually described earlier as well. Okay, an assignment evaluates the right-hand side of the single equal symbol, figure out what value it is. In this case, it is kind of trivial. Okay, zero is just zero as a value. And then what it will do is it will update the left-hand side or the variable identified by the left-hand side and go like, hey, AE total expense, I don't care what value you're holding right now. Guess what? You're now going to store the value of zero from here on. Correct. You're updating AE's total expense to a value of zero. Is that okay? So there are two parts to understand a programming language. The syntax is one, which means, what is grammatically correct. The other side is what we call the semantics of the statements, or of whatever you specify, which is basically asking, but what does it do? Okay? There are many ways to formulate an English sentence that is meaningless, but grammatically correct. Okay? And it's the same way in programming. Syntax is one, which is the grammar, and then the semantics is the meaning. All right, so now we move on to something that is a little bit more obscure. So I think I made a mistake here. This close brace is not supposed to be there. So I am going to fix it now because if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget. So I do apologize that this part may look a little bit confusing because I have to switch to the editor. and I'm looking for the name expands with a close brace. Okay, so let's go a search expands with a close brace. There we go. Found it. Get rid of the close brace that's not supposed to be there. Commit changes, which is going to trigger the mechanism to update the original document. It takes about a minute, to update it so that it is visible here. So we're just going to wait just a little bit here. Yep, go ahead. Hmm. Yep. Hmm. Yep. So we'll see, what to do with this line one here, because this line one looks really kind of confusing, especially for mathematicians. And you would expect mathematicians to, readily understand programs, okay, which is basically a branch of applied math. But that is not the case because of the notations that we choose to use. I think I explained that, last time as well. All right, so I'm just waiting for the whole thing to update. Okay, maybe. Nope. Why is it not updating? Not yet. I must have two of these. Nope, that's the only one. All right, I'm gonna do it one more time. Okay, give me a second here. It's possible that I made a mistake when I was doing that. So we have expands. Hmm? Is it updated now? Okay. Hmm. It's still here. So maybe I forgot to click something, or there's another instance of the same thing. Commit changes. Let's do that. And it's on the main branch. Okay, so everything is checking out. Oop, no, not that. Control R. All right, I'm gonna check something else. This is how, you can. This is how I use GitHub. Is I can check. Okay, it's still being deployed, being built. Okay, so it's just taking a little bit longer. That's all. How many of your other classes make use of OER, which means the professor gives you free material for the course? Okay, your trick. Okay, very good. And it's still doing it, which is kind of concerning because it shouldn't be taking that long. Okay, now it's done. So once it's done, we can refresh, and the brace is gone. Okay, very good. So um, if you like OER because you don't have to pay, and then your professor can always expand on the material depending on how the class is responding to the material. In other words, it's a lot more fluid compared to anything from a publisher. Tell your other professors who are not using OER about OER, open educational resources, because there's a okay, I'm saying this because of selfishness, because I'm the chair of the ALMC, the Affordable Learning Material Committee of this campus. So part of my job is to promote, any type of mechanism that can help lower the cost of learning material to our students. So, but I can use your help, okay? If you can try to tell your other professors who are not yet using, free and low cost resources, you can try to tell your professors, it's like, I would like to have these resources being less expensive or best, free, so that I don't have to wait for the check in order to pay for my textbook, and I can get started right away. Okay. All right, cool. So now that the notation is fixed, we'll look at the first line or line one, and then we say, that looks awfully confusing, okay? Because if we are changing available funds, but we are also using the value of available funds to calculate how to change it, doesn't this make an infinite loop, or aren't we pulling the rug from under ourselves? Well, the answer is no, okay, obviously, because otherwise, we wouldn't be using this kind of, statement. So the answer is no because of one reason. There's an order to evaluating, an assignment operation. The first thing that you do is always look at the right-hand side, evaluate it first. In other words, whatever the value is for available funds is right now, whatever the value is of X is right now, use those values. Just perform a subtraction. Is that okay? Comes back with a value, right? Whatever the value turns out to be, just change available funds to that value, and you're done. So there's no loop, there's no pulling the rug from under yourself. It is just evaluate the right-hand side and then update the left-hand side. Now, if the right-hand side turns out to mention the very same variable that is also on the left-hand side, well, so be it. It should not bother you. Is that okay? So are we understanding how to treat and how to evaluate these type of assignment statements where the right-hand side mentions the very same variable on the left-hand side? Yes. So that's something that we'll talk about later. Okay. So the question was, how do we know the value of the variables at this time? So we'll talk about that, in um, I think it's just another slide down or another page down. Okay. The left-hand side. Yep. Yep. Instead of, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. All right. So the way we know what to do requires you to be tracking the values of all the variables, right? Because unless you know the current value of X and the current values of available funds and AE total expense, you cannot perform these operations. And the way we do that is to use what I call a trace table. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. So this is what I call a trace table. In other words, this helps you keep track of the values of all the variables in your program. We start with the leftmost column of this table, which is line number. In other words, this is a historical record of how the values of all the variables got changed as the code executes. Is that okay? Think of this as a movie, okay? And every row is a frame in the movie. It gives you a snapshot at a specific time. Are we good with that analogy? Okay. The first row is pre. The word pre is an abbreviation of precondition. It is the condition before the program starts to execute. In other words, these are the things that are given to you. Don't ask me why, but you are given that x equals to 71, which is your credit card statement amount, and available funds is 261. You have $261 in the bank before we run the critical algorithm. And AE total expense was a zero because this is the beginning of the year. It is January. Okay. So the pre-line says, okay, what are we given with before the code starts execution? All right. And then after that, each line has a line number, and whatever is on the other portions of that row is telling you after line one, in this case executes, what are the values in the variables. So let me scroll, let me see if I can display both the source code. I cannot. Okay, maybe. Yep, we can. So this is line one, and as line one, after line one executes, available funds will be subtracted by 71, and that's why it went from 261 to 190. Is that okay? So every row records the new state of the variables after that line executes. Yep, because we have not gotten to line 2 yet. Okay, so each line or each row of the table is only reflecting the changes after the execution of that line alone. So we are looking at the effect of line 1 right here. We have not executed line 2 yet. So it is very tedious. It's line by line. Okay, so when we move on to the next row, okay, this row here, this row is basically saying after line 2 executes, what's going to happen? Well, nothing is going to happen to x because your line 2 does not, it mentions x only on the right hand side. X is not going to change. It doesn't make any changes to available funds because the variable on the left hand side is AE total expense. It doesn't change available funds. So that's why available funds remain the same as the previous row. On the other hand, AE total expense is now changed because this line is going to calculate 0 plus 71 and then use the sum, which is 71, to update AE total expense because AE total expense is the left-hand side of the assignment operation on line 2. So that's why, AE total expense, changed from 0 to 71. Is that okay? So now we end the entire trace table with something that does not seem to be necessary, which is post. If pre is precondition, what do you think post is representing? Post condition. If precondition is what is given to you before you start the execution of an algorithm, what do you think post condition is telling you? It's the condition or the state of all the variables after the execution of the entire algorithm, which is basically the conclusion of the execution of the algorithm. Yes, that is correct. So AE total expense stays as a 0 for the first and the second row, the pre and the one, because it is only until we get to line 2 that the assignment changes the value of AE total expense. Okay, so this might give you some clue as to how this class is going to be conducted. We are not going to compile any program using the GCC or the G++ compiler. We're not going to let the computer run any algorithm that we are deriving. Guess who is going to run the programs? Yes. And guess how we're going to track everything? A trace table. Okay. And I know it sounds awfully tedious, okay? But at the same time, now, when it comes to things this simple, it goes like, well, we don't really need a table to track everything. But we're going to talk about very advanced, fairly advanced concepts in this class where you really kind of need to track everything as you execute the program on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet. And that's what we're going to do, okay, in this class. The syntax that we are using is actual C, C++ syntax. So there's nothing, well, not much that you have to relearn when you move on to CISP 360. The only difference is in CISP 360, the focus is no longer whether you know what the computer is supposed to do, because by that time you should know what the computer is supposed to do, and your focus is to work on more complex algorithms and then let the computer to actually run the code. But in this class, the focus is I need to make sure that you know what the computer is supposed to do. Okay. I can kind of imagine there are questions like, if the computer can do it already, why do I need to understand how the computer gets it done? Okay. What do you think is the answer? Hmm. But if I want to find out what the computer, what this program, what a piece of code is supposed to do, I can just run it to figure out, what the program is going to do using a debugger. What is wrong with that approach? Yes, exactly. Now, so your answer or your point is, if we don't understand what the computer is supposed to do, then we cannot create, what we cannot make algorithms to solve specific problems. That is correct, but I can always just use the trial and error approach. I'll just kind of randomly crank out some code and hopefully it works and then just run it on the computer to see whether it works or not. Okay, which I refer to as the infinite monkey approach. If you guys heard about, if you have an infinite number of monkeys on typewriters, one of them will eventually, type, Shakespeare level novels. Okay, I think that's the general idea of an infinite monkey approach. So what is wrong with that approach? You're only one person. You're not an infinite number of people. Okay? And so, my focus is I need to make sure that you know what the constructs in a programming language like C++ does in terms of the actual fundamental mechanisms. Okay? Would you trust a contractor to do some work for your house when a contractor goes like, well, you know what? I just got this tool today and it's complicated. I lost the manual, but guess what? I'll figure out how it works. Okay, I have no idea what this button do. Okay, I'll just test it on your wall right here. Would you trust a contractor like that? You want a contractor who knows everything about all the tools that he or she has. Okay, this tool does this one thing, and this is how I can set up the depth of the cut, or how quickly it does, it drills and so on. And this little thing here is for collecting the dust, from the sawing or the drilling and so on. You want a contractor who know the tools before the job even starts. It's the same thing with programming. Is that okay? All right. So I just want to make it clear, what my philosophy is, teaching classes, not just this one, because some of you will see me again when you need to take CISP 310 as well as CISP 440. For both of those courses, they're both quote unquote capstone classes, which means there are no other classes at ARC or Los Rios that depends on CISP 310 or CISP 440. Typically, people can take both of those classes in their very last semester here in Los Rios. But I'm the only person on this campus teaching those two classes. So to quote Thanos from MCU, I am inevitable. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. But not in the same context, obviously. Yes. You could have taken 480 this semester. So what CISP 480 is a combination of 300 and 360 combined into one single course. So if you were to take CISP 480, you would have saved, let's see, one semester of time, and also in terms of units, it would be compacting 7 units as a total down to a five. But there's a compression of time there. Okay, so the concepts that are involved, instead of having 32 weeks to talk about all the concepts, they're compressed into 16 weeks. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit too late to transition to that class. But if you're curious and you want to consider your transitioning to CISP 480, ask Kakashan, okay, because she's teaching CISP 480, and check out where she is in terms of her class material. If it is still at about the same level that we are here, then you can probably still make the switch. If it's not, then probably don't make the switch this semester, right? You might have a hard time catching up with your CISP 480 in that class. But it is an option. Okay. Alrighty. So now the question is mechanically, how do we make a trace table? You can use a piece of paper. Okay, that's as simple as that. Okay, use a piece of paper and then just make sure that you have vertical lines and horizontal lines and make a table out of it, and then just fill in the table. But the best way, and also how I want you to turn in the homework assignments, is just to use a Google Sheet. So Google Sheets, actually, it is in plural. So this is the table that I have made for the example that I have given you a little bit earlier, and I really like how people are kind of following you know the, the the class material, because there's a hyperlink. You just click it and it brings you here. So you can see this table is exactly the same as the other one, except this is in Google Sheets. The way we use Google Sheets in this class is really, really simple. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of tricks that you have to learn. So if I were to do this one more time, okay, so I'm going to copy and paste the content onto a new sheet, you would see that, but it doesn't look good, okay? It has all the right things, the content is right, all the numbers are right, but it just doesn't look good, okay? Because some columns are too wide and so on and so forth. It's easy to fix that problem, okay? Let me show you how to do it. So you can also mark the time if you want to remember, the time when I illustrated, or you can just write down in your notes how to do this. You select the columns, which means you're not selecting the cells. Let me do this one more time. You click on the column itself, and then hold down the Shift key to the last column that you also want to include. So Shift click. So now I have selected the four columns where I need some quote unquote automatic reformatting. Okay. And this next part is super easy. Move your mouse until it turns into this symbol. Okay, the left, right, arrow, which is for resizing a column. You don't have to resize the columns one at a time. That would be kind of painful. Okay, especially later on in this semester, we'll have a lot of columns. Double click right now. Okay, there we go. Every single column that was selected is now resized to what it needs, but no more. Is that okay? So it's just a trick to do the formatting. Do you have to format all the columns correctly when you turn in your homework assignment? The answer is no. Okay, but this does make it easier to read. Okay, so I think it's helpful to know, but it's not essential. Are we good so far? All right. So we're going to use your Google Sheets to do homework assignments, which is perfect timing to get to the next topic, which is your very first homework assignment. So I'll click on it, I'll explain the instructions a little bit and see if there are any questions about the instructions. I believe it is already published. You guys can see it already, but you cannot do much about it right now because it has not been released yet. So the instruction says follow this link to a shared Google spreadsheet or Google Sheets. So if I were to do this with a right click and then open it with a new tab, I like to open new tabs so I don't lose the original document. So this is what it looks like. Then you go back to the instruction. Oh, not this one, right here. Okay, so then you go to the instruction. The next one says you have to log in to your own Los Rios Google Drive account, and I even give you a link here. So if you click on that link, or if you right click on that link and open the new tab, it might prompt you for re-authentication if you have not signed into your Google account associated with Los Rios yet. But if you're already in, it won't ask you for anything. So in my case, if I just right click here and open a new tab, it gives me access to my entire Google Drive. Okay. And then what you need to do is then go back to the Google spreadsheet, which is the one that I provided, which is this one here. Go to File and then go to Make a Copy. Well, just be sure that you catch up with all the material. You will be responsible for that. Okay. So over here, you click Make a Copy. You should be able to click that. And right here, there are a few things you have to be careful about. First one is you probably want to rename the file. Instead of making it copy of assignment one, you want to rename it to just assignment one or assignment one of CISP 300. Okay, you can choose whatever you want. Okay, I don't care about the name. And so I'm just going to say assignment one of CISP 300. But the next step is super duper important. You go to the folder and make sure that you navigate to your own drive. So go to all locations, go to your own drive, double click it, and then at that point, you can either create a new folder or just go to a particular folder. It's the typical folder navigation that you should be familiar with, with just using an operating system. The reason why I have to emphasize this particular step is if you don't do it this way, you will be attempting to create a new file in my folder, which you cannot. Okay, so make sure that you specify the destination in what folder in your own drive you want to create a copy. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm just gonna use an example here. I'm gonna go to ARC, go to the folder of this semester and say select, and do not click this one because if you click this one, it will be visible to the whole class. So don't do that. There are no comments, so none of these check marks actually apply in this case. And you click make a copy. Google Drives or Google Sheets will actually give you a new tab right away, and this is going to be your copy. Now, the first thing you want to do, okay, is to make sure that I can grade it. And to do that, you have to make sure that it is shared with me. So let me move the clock a little bit up here. So click on share. Now, mine is going to look a little different from you because I'm the actual owner of this particular file. But for you, you have to type, you need to share that with this particular address. Make sure that you include apps here. Okay, and the current time is 10:12-ish. Okay, so if you want to jot down the exact instructions to do this, you can just kind of mark the time and then go back to the recording. Yes, because I need to be able to view the document. Okay, um, and you can share that with me and make it restricted. But I would like to. Oh, okay, take it back here. You want to make me an editor of the document so that I can actually quote unquote edit the document. Is that okay? So not just view only, but I need to be able to edit the document. So that's an important step because if you don't do this step, you can complete the homework assignment, but I cannot grade it. So going back to the instructions, okay, so let me go back here. Using the algorithm in the code tab, trace it in the trace tab. So if we go back here, you can see there's a code tab here. This is the program. It's a little bit more complicated than the example in the notes, but nonetheless only involves the concept that we have learned already. And then you go to the trace tab, and this is where you perform the actual trace. So your trace should look something similar, but not exactly like the trace that I showed you earlier in class. Do we have any questions about doing the homework assignment up to this point? I mean that it should look like this. Now, obviously, not the same variables, right? Yeah, because the code is different, but it should look something similar to this, right? And the assignment also has additional details. The trace should follow conventions as used and demonstrated in class, like today's class. Okay, this is the class that it's referring to, and this is a summary. Okay, one column for line number. Okay, you don't have to spell a number, just use a pound sign, it's fine, and one additional column for each variable used in the code. Use the first row to describe each column. The second row should be a pre, okay, which is the precondition of the entire thing. The last row, and then for things that are unknown to begin with, use a question mark to start. I'll go back in the instruction to show you what I mean by that. So the full instruction is here, including how to share the document with me. My ID is W00068887, but you have to append at apps.losreals.edu to turn it into an email address. So I can revise the instruction to reflect that. Right. Okay, so let me go back to the instructions now. Okay, so we go back to Actually, the slide is still up. I can just go back to the slide. No, not this one. Where did it go? There we go. Nope, nope, not this one. I think I lost track of my original sheet. That's okay. Just change the 13 to a 12. There we go. All right. So there's one little thing that I need to do. That's what we're going to spend the last 5 minutes to do, and then I'll take row really quickly. So if I'm using this code here, this is the trace table. Well, I'm missing the post line here, but what I want to illustrate is for this code, I did not tell you ahead of time what is the initial value of x, nor the initial value of y. So in that case, the precondition is you put a question mark here and put a question mark here, because I do not really know the value of x or the value of y before the algorithm starts. So you have to use the same convention in your homework assignment. You can also see that I don't fill in every single cell in this particular trace. That's because unless there is a change to a cell, I just leave it blank. If you need to know, let's say, at the after line 3 executes, and you need to know what is the value of x, is a blank here. And in that case, you have to go up until you see something that is not a blank. So that means on after line 3 executes, the value of x is 6. And that value of 6 is put into variable x on line 1. Yep, yes, that is a multiplication. So this asterisk symbol here means multiplication. That is correct. All right. So that's kind of the format that I want you guys to use in the homework assignment. So if you look at this code here, I did not tell you ahead of time what the values are for x and y initially. So that means now you have to make sure that the first row, okay, let me go back to the module here, right here. So you have to basically make sure that x and y start with question marks. All right, so I'm going to take row right now. And the row taking activity is already in. I just need to make it visible. So there we go. So if you sign in to Canvas right now, you should be able to see the row taking activity for today. And remember to submit the quiz. Okay, I think a few people forgot to click the submit button, and that's why I did not see a score of 0. Okay, so you go there. It will ask you about the access code today. The access code is condition, all in lowercase. So I'll write it on the whiteboard, condition. There we go. Okay, let me show you what I mean by remembering to click the submit button, because some people forgot. So you take the quiz, put in condition here, all lowercase, click on submit. I'm not referring to this submit here. There's another submit here, submit quiz. I think some people forgot to click this. So, on my end, I could not tell that that person actually participated. So make sure that you click submit quiz, like so. And you should see a score of 0 out of 0 to confirm that you have successfully participated in this row taking activity. So that's kind of the deal that I'm going to use to take row in the class. Um, and make sure that you click everything to kind of show me that you were actually in class on that day. Attendance is important, not because I'm teaching elementary school, but because one, this is actually an in-person class. The way I teach this class is supposed to work when you're actually present in class. It is not an online class. And two, I think the structure of an in-person class helps a lot of people. Yes, go ahead. The class is also getting recorded. The recording can be accessed using a link from the earlier part of the class. So I'm still in student view, which is also what you see. If you go to home and then go to course information, and here's the link to my YouTube channel. So click on that and you land here. you go to videos, and then all the classes, all the recording is encoded by the date of the class and also the actual class code itself. Yep. Alrighty. So I'm gonna end the recorder now because it is 10:20 and there's another class that needs to come in. So make sure that you do the homework. It is due next Monday. Okay. But I am available, in office hour and also by email. Okay. So if you do have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me.